friends. Welcome back to ABN's Trinity channel for another episode of Islam and the News. Today is Friday, September 15th in the year of our Lord, 2017. And as always, it's great to be back once again for another hour worth of news headlines that you will not hear or see in the mainstream media. And we thank God for you and your continued prayers and support and just helping to keep this ministry running and the satellite feeds flowing and the internet's feed flowing as well, as it's not only flowing through high-speed internet throughout the world and through satellite to North America, Middle East, North Africa, United Kingdom, or I'm sorry, not United Kingdom anymore, but we do want to get that. That's what I was thinking. I was saying we want to get that one back. So we actually want to get a feed even to Asia. So I mean, if we could have the funds to start more satellite feeds each month, that would be great, because right now we're already going through high-speed internet throughout the world, and we're already on the ABN Sat app, which you can download for free on just about any device, electronic device that's out there, including smartphones, smart TVs, Apple TV, Amazon Fire Stick TV, Roku, and all of that. But it'd be great to get a satellite feed throughout the world. We don't have that right now. We have North America, we have the Middle East, we have North Africa, Australia, and New Zealand. We used to have one going to the UK, but that one, because of the financial issues that we were having, had to be dropped. But it would be great to get that one back, and it'd be great to get a feed to Asia as well, and just to make sure that we are covered throughout the world. So even if people have only a television and an old school satellite dish, they can still watch all of these ABN shows that we feed out. So please continue to pray for ABN, the Trinity channel, and support it as well. And let them know when you call up and make a donation, say, hey, I want to help fund the satellite to this particular continent, or I want to help fund the digital tree in whatever way that you can support that, or you want to help get this onto even more platforms, or just say, hey, I just want to use this money. I want you to use this money for any necessities that are around the ABN headquarters, things that you need, new equipment or new lights or whatever else. You can ask them to have the money go towards something specific, and they will honor that. And we thank you for all the support that you have given in allowing these shows to continue every single week. Again, we have the second International Apologetics Marathon of 2017 coming up October 2nd through 6th. So please let your friends know about it. And probably within just the next few days, we're going to have probably a commercial, if not more than that. But we definitely want to let you know about it, let you know all the different great topics that we're going to be covering during that 5 days. There's, I think, 14 shows that we're going to be doing Monday through Friday, October 2nd through 6th. So please stay tuned. Let other people know about it as well, because the next marathon is not until March 2018. So you never want to miss them. Now, we want to get to the news. We have some, of course, breaking news headlines here, as well as just some news that, again, you won't get in the mainstream media at all. And then, of course, today we actually have a lot of persecution news. So we definitely want to be praying for Christians throughout the world who don't have the freedom that we have here in the West. And, of course, they're living under Sharia, and they are letting us know what life is like under that. And they are sending a warning to the West. So, getting to the news, I have here first from Al Arabia, I have homemade bomb injures 22 on packed London train. Yes, this is breaking news from this morning. It says here, a homemade bomb on a packed rush hour commuter train in London engulfed a carriage in flames and injured 22 people on Friday in Britain's fifth major terrorism incident this year, but apparently failed to fully explode. It says here, passengers heading into the British capital fled into panic after the blast as the train was about to depart Parsons Green Underground Station in West London at 8:20 a.m. Some suffered burns and others were injured in a stampede to escape, but health officials said none were thought to be in serious condition. It says here, quote, "We now assess that this was a detonation of an improvised explosive device," Britain's top counterterrorism officer Mark Rowley told reporters. It also says police said a hunt involving hundreds of detectives backed by the intelligence services was underway to find out who was responsible. Rowley declined to say if the suspected bomber had been on the train, saying it was a live investigation. Now, right underneath there, it says ISIS claims responsibility, Meanwhile, ISIS claimed responsibility for the blast on a packed commuter train on the London Underground network, the military's group, a mock news agency said. Now, as if you have been watching past episodes of Islam in the News, this is no surprise. As I've said a number of times before, this is one thing that makes ISIS different from Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda has a lot of the old school guys who like to be in complete control of operations and all that other kind of stuff. ISIS is this younger crowd who is more focused on inspiring other people to do things. So whereas Al-Qaeda, likes to be in complete control and know what's going on, with ISIS, if they never even talk to somebody, and then somebody goes out and commits something that they approve of or that they like or that they would do themselves, then they claim responsibility for that because they want to just be an influence on people throughout the world. And they aren't worried about being in complete control of every operation and every incident that happens, all that. They just want to inspire people, regardless of your location, regardless of what happens. If it's on a minor scale or a major scale, they will take responsibility for it. Now, continuing on with the same news headline, but out of an Australian news agency, I have here London tube explosion. ISIS claims responsibility as UK upgrades terror threat to critical. It says London police have launched a manhunt after a bomb detonated on a packed London Underground train, unleashing a wall of fire that injured at least 29 people in the country's 5th terror attack in 6 months. British Prime Minister Theresa May has announced the UK's threat level has been raised to critical, quote unquote, meaning another attack may be imminent. The Metropolitan Police Force said there has been no arrests so far, but hundreds of detectives aided by intelligence agents were looking at surveillance camera footage of the subway, carrying out forensic work and speaking to witnesses. Passengers on board a train heading into the capital fled as fire engulfed a carriage at Parsons Green Underground Station in West London after the explosion again at 8:20 a.m. Again, ISIS has claimed one of its detachments, quote unquote, was behind the attack in a statement on its mock news agency. Pictures taken at the scene showed a white bucket with a supermarket freezer bag on the floor of one train carriage. The bucket was in flames and there appeared to be wires coming out of the top. It is believed an initial charge on the device had exploded, but the main charge failed to detonate. It's not clear whether the device was intended to explode when it did. The site of the blast was in a leafy, affluent part of the city, not near any of London's top tourist sites. British media reported the bomb had a timer on it as well. Rowley declined to answer whether the authorities knew who was responsible or if the suspected bomber had been on the train. He said most of the injuries were thought to be flash burns, while others were injured in a stampede to escape. The National Health Service said none of the injured were thought to be in serious condition. So again, we have here some similar details to these stories. Again, one coming from the Middle East, one coming from Australia, but of course we have some differing details there as well. Just like with this Australian news saying that it was 29 people now rather than 22. So we don't have contradictory news stories, we have complementary ones because they're both saying that this event happened, but they're giving different details, some more than others. I also have here from The Sun, PM hits back, Theresa May scolds unhelpful Donald Trump after he claimed two-bomber was known to Scotland Yard. It says, in a growing diplomatic row, the U.S. president hit back, saying the UK and America had not been tough enough, quote unquote, on terror after the bomb attack at London that left 29 injured. It says Trump has since called the prime minister to offer his condolences, while the White House confirmed. The president phoned to convey his sympathies and prayers to those injured in the terrorist attack in London, the White House said. Says a Downing Street spokesman said, quote, President Trump called the prime minister earlier today to offer his condolences over this morning's cowardly attack in London. It says, quote, they also discussed North Korea's latest missile test, agreeing it was a reckless provocation and that China must now use all its leverage to bring pressure to bear on the North Korean regime to ensure they change course and end these illegal tests. Also, another news story that is surrounding this same area, and it also just happened within the last 24 hours as well. I have here from Bare Naked Islam, Paris, Allahu Akbar, a shouting Muslim terrorist knife attack on a soldier. It says here, a man has been arrested after trying to stab a soldier on patrol in a train station near Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. He made, quote, remarks referring to Allah, according to a police source quoted in French media. Motive is yet unknown. And these are pictures 3.1, 2, and 3.1, 3.2 through 3.3 that we have here for you. The Muslim knifeman attacked a soldier at the Châtelet metro station, right in the center of the city, at about 6:30 a.m. The station, which would have been busy with rush hour commuters, is less than hours walk from the Eiffel Tower. The man is not thought to have been known to police, according to French media. The soldier, who appears to have escaped unharmed, was carrying out an anti-terror patrol as part of the Operation Sentinel. Operation Sentinel was launched after the Paris attacks, which claimed 130 lives in the French capital in November of 2015. The incident, in which the soldier in question was not injured, was the latest of several attacks on troops deployed in large numbers to patrol sensitive places in France after a series of attacks by Islamist militants that have killed more than 230 people in France in the past 3 years. I have here from the Washington Post, ISIS is near defeat in Iraq. Now comes the hard part. Out of Mosul in Iraq, it says the collapse of the Islamic State is in its most important Iraqi strongholds has brought a rare moment of hope for a country mired in war for most of the past 4 decades. It is also a moment of peril as Iraq emerges from the fight against the militants, only to be confronted with the same problems that fueled their spectacular rise in 2014. Old disputes between Sunnis, Shiites, and Kurds over territory, resources, and power already are resurfacing as the victors of the battles compete to control liberated areas or jostle for political advantage in the post-Islamic State landscape. These rivalries now are compounded by the mammoth task of rebuilding the towns and cities destroyed by the fighting, returning millions of displaced people to their homes, and reconciling the communities that once welcomed the Islamic State's brutal rule as preferable to their own government's neglect and abuse. A failure to manage the post-conflict situation risks a repeat of the cycle of grievance and revolt that fueled the original Iraqi insurgents in 2003 and its reincarnation in the form of the Islamic State after 2011, Iraqis and other observers say. But it is a vast and potentially insurmountable challenge laid bare in the traumatized communities of Mosul. In the city's relatively unscathed east, life has bounced back. Traffic clogs the streets, music blares from markets, and stores are piled high with consumer goods such as cell phones, air conditioners, and satellite dishes that were banned or hard to find under Islamic State rule. In the ravaged West, which bore the brunt of the fighting, entire neighborhoods have been leveled beyond repair. In the old city alone, 230,000 people have been left without habitation. And, quote, they are not going home soon. The whole district has to be rebuilt. This was said by Lise Grand, the deputy special representative of the UN mission in Iraq. So far, there's no sign of any reconstruction effort on the scale that will be required, said Hoshyar Zabari, a former Iraqi foreign minister who is from Mosul and now works as an advisor with the Kurdish regional government. From AMN, I have Kurdish forces send huge convoy to defeat ISIS in Deir ez-Zor. Footage has emerged of a massive Kurdish convoy heading southwards along the main road leading to Hazakar to Deir ez-Zor over the past week. The Syrian Democratic Forces, SDF, have brushed aside all ISIS resistance since launching their large-scale offensive, dubbed the Al Jazara Storm. The video released by the Kurdish YPG showed technicals and Humvees driving en route to Deir ez-Zor. An emphasis in especially put on female fighters, as you're about to see here in a moment. Heavily backed by U.S. strikes, SDF combatants have thus far captured over a dozen villages and even reached the northern bank of the Euphrates River. Effectively, a large ISIS pocket has formed in the northwestern countryside of Deir ez-Zor, where a string of jihadist-held towns on the Euphrates River have been cut off from the Islamic State mainland. And as you can see, we have a video for you now.
نخونده ولا تعش کوبارمه هر بدرنا آمدنش کنه همه بچه حمله دیر از زور است یعنی هم گلی خواه میجن دیر از زور یعنی پرکی خواشن هم طولا شهید خواه را بکن هم گلی خواه رزگار بکن
من عافين أقدار أشقام شنو راستيجي كي برفرها حملة كي جدونا ديوكيه وكي جيجي أم في حملة جيه خود قرن براستيجي وكي يبجي مرالي ما هيجاني ما كي خوشيا ما نتني جبو قلي كور جبو حمو سنتوا سوريا ديمقراطيك جي شاركرن او جبو ما پیروزباهی پر مزنجي ام پر كي پاشن و ناو ده گرتن پر گرینگه
بریتان ورشیناش بجار خام شلومان وك جنين يبهجد بيحم لدى دسبيك يعني بكم طولا جنين يسيرا كان بيش بكم طولا وراكن والحطا جي ان بيجي ديشن بغمرا بدوش قايا هو كان ضامن يبهجي متهملي هالحملة ببن حتى كو داعش هابي امجي مهاب
Also here from AMN, I have a map to show you as well as a headline that says ISIS empire shrinks by 70% in Syria since start of 2017. It says here, since the beginning of 2017, the Islamic State's empire in Syria has shrunk by about 70%. Most of this achievement can be attributed to the Syrian Arab Army, its paramilitary allies, and Russian intervention forces. In mid-January of this year, the Syrian Arab Army and its allies, backed up by Russian air power, commenced on an offensive against ISIS in eastern Aleppo governorate in the north of the country. At the same time, pro-government forces in the center of the country also restarted their push into eastern Homs governorate. The immediate objectives of these campaigns were to liberate the remainder of Aleppo province that was still under ISIS control and re-liberate the ancient city of Palmyra, respectively. From Clarion Project, I have how much U.S. aid pledged to Syrian kids didn't arrive. That's the question that's being asked here, as it says, millions of dollars of aid bound for Syrian child refugees has vanished, says Human Rights Watch. A large chunk of this is likely to be from American taxpayers and others in the West. The money pledged in 2016 was bound for school children living in Jordan, Lebanon, and Turkey, but much of it never arrived. Came late or remains untraceable because of, quote, poor reporting practices. What is not clear from HWR's 55-page report is whether the donor states paid out the money in full or whether some of the cash simply disappeared en route. More than 500,000 children had no schooling last year, in large part because there was insufficient money available to pay for their education. It says here, quote, the U.S. Agency for International Development reported that it provided development aid of $248 million for education in Jordan, but its own aid tracking database only accounted for 82 million American dollars. And a Jordanian government database listed only 13 million U.S. American dollars received for education from the U.S. in the entire year of 2016. And that is just one example. Human Rights Watch suggests much of the money pledged is simply not paid, but also points to the lack of cohesive accounting of the entire system, including governments, aid agencies, and others. From Al-Alam News, I have here new details on the hunt for ISIS leader al-Baghdadi. It says CNN reports that at one point over the summer, the U.S. believed they had their best shot at killing the terrorist leader in an airstrike, according to several U.S. officials. The strike, which has never been publicly disclosed, was based on intelligence that indicated a senior ISIS leader, quite possibly al-Baghdadi, was at the particular location. But the officials familiar with the strike tell CNN it has never been definitively determined if Baghdadi was actually killed. But one official told CNN that over recent months, it says here, quote, "we tried to take several shots at him." One reason the U.S. remains uncertain if it killed Baghdadi is that in the days and weeks that followed the strike, U.S. intelligence did not intercept any ISIS communication confirming his death, and there was no discussion on ISIS social media accounts. U.S. officials said. Given Baghdadi's stature, the U.S. expects to see significant chatter discussing his death if he is killed. The strike occurred after a claim by Russia in June that the ISIS leader might have been killed in one of its airstrikes on the outskirts of Raqqa on May 28th. The U.S. has long believed that the Russian claim is not true. In another instance, CNN has learned that U.S. military planners for a ground mission being conducted by U.S. forces thought they were on Baghdadi's trail for a significant period of time. Intelligence indicated an individual with the name al-Baghdadi was a target site, a U.S. official confirmed to CNN. Senior administration officials were briefed, but a raid did not happen because of concern over the potential number of civilians at the site. The U.S. official says they now believe Baghdadi was likely not at the location. It remains unclear if that individual had any relation to the ISIS leader. From Time, I have here, if it wants to come up, maybe it doesn't want to come up. It is a very interesting news story that I wanted to share with you. And this is about, let me just read it here, it's finally coming up. In an interview, a top Indonesian Muslim scholar says, "Stop pretending that Orthodox Islam and violence are not linked." It says Indonesia, the world's biggest Muslim majority country, has a constitution that recognizes other major religions and practices a syncretic form of Islam that draws on not just the faith's tenets, but local spiritual and cultural traditions. As a result, the nation has long been a voice of and for moderation in the Islamic world. Yes, this is coming out of the country in the world with more Muslims than any other country. It says, yet Indonesia is not without its radical elements. Though most are on the fringe, they can add up to a significant number given Indonesia's 260 million population. In the early 2000s, the country was terrorized by Jemaah Islamiyah, a homegrown extremist organization allied with Al-Qaeda. JI's deadliest attack was the 2002 Bali bombing that killed 202 people. While JI has been neutralized, ISIS has claimed responsibility for, again, ISIS claiming responsibility for recent smaller terrorist incidents in the country and has inspired some Indonesians to fight in Syria. Indonesians who could pose a threat when they return home. The country has also seen the rise of hate groups that preach intolerance and violence against local religious and ethnic minorities, which include Shia and Ahmadiyya Muslims. Now, I want to scroll down to just a couple of the questions. This is an interview that happened here. And one of them says here, one of the questions was, what basic assumptions within traditional Islam are problematic? The answer is the relationship between Muslims and non-Muslims, the relationship of Muslims with the state, and Muslims' relationship with to the prevailing legal system wherever they live. Within the classical tradition, the relationship between Muslims and non-Muslims is assumed to be one of segregation and enmity. Perhaps there were reasons for this during the Middle Ages when the tenets of Islamic orthodoxy were established. But in today's world, such a doctrine is unreasonable. To the extent that Muslims adhere to this view of Islam, it renders them incapable of living harmoniously and peacefully within the multicultural, multi-religious societies of the 21st century. So again, if you want to see this entire article, this whole Q&A that happens, you can go to time.com And again, the title is An Interview Top Indonesian Muslim Scholars to Stop Pretending That Orthodox Islam and Violence Are Not Linked or Aren't Linked. Now, as we see here, this is just one more example of the different Muslims who we see throughout the world today. We have those who strive to do what Muhammad said to do. And of course, they are jihadists, would definitely fall into that. You know, they are just continuing the actions of Muhammad at the end of his life, and they're trying to spread Islam. And we see at the same time, we see the political Islamists who aren't out there physically fighting with the jihadists, but they also want the world to be under Sharia. They're also following what Muhammad said to do. But they, of course, are willing to modernize, to coexist to a degree in the 21st century. But at the same time, they are different than your moderate Muslim who just wants to peacefully, practice their religion. And when I say peacefully, I don't mean the Islamic view of what peace actually means, but like peace and tranquility kind of peace. The kind of peace that people in America usually think Islam means when it mentions peace. Then, of course, you have the nominal Muslims who really don't follow Islam in any way. I mean, they say, yeah, I'm a Muslim because I went to a mosque when I was a kid, or, oh yeah, I own a Quran. You ask them when was the last time you read it? They're like, probably 6 years ago. So of course you have all of these groups, usually in just about every religion out there. You have the nominal, which means in name only, and then you have the most devout. But if you take this to Christianity, yes, you have the nominal who say, I'm a Christian because I was baptized when I was a baby, or yeah, I'm a Christian because I have a Bible on the shelf that I never read. And then of course you have that moderate where they're like, yeah, I go to church here and there. I believe in Jesus. I believe in God. They may or may not have repented and put their trust in Christ, which actually is what needs to happen to actually be reconciled to God. And then you of course have the Christians who are devout. They like to know God's word. They want to read God's word. They love to go to church. They like to be involved with other Christians. They like to love non-Christians. And be Christ-like and love people the way Jesus would, and then share the gospel with them. And you have the most devout, of course, who fall into that group as well. What chain of the most devout Christians out there are actually out killing people, or actually out punishing people because they left Christianity, or because they've made fun of the Bible, or they've called God a mean God because there's evil in the world, or because they called Jesus a name, or desecrated a picture of Jesus, or something like that. The most devout Christians out there do what Jesus said to do. That means that they're loving their enemies, they're sharing the gospel, and they go and be missionaries in countries. They go to countries where it's hard to be a Christian, but it's because they have a love for human beings made in the image of God. And that's why they want to go there and share the gospel with people. So if you get the most devout Muslim who does what Muhammad said to do, and you get the most devout Christian who does what Jesus said to do, there is no question which one is the true religion of peace, and peace meaning that peace and tranquility, everything is harmonious kind of peace. And again, in case you are not aware, the Islamic view of peace is referring to Dar al-Islam, when the entire world is under Sharia. Okay, then there is peace because there's no more Jahiliyyah. There's no more countries in the world that are not under Sharia. There are no more governmental bodies who are influencing people in a bad way. Why? Because every single country is under Sharia as a whole. So very interesting news story here. And like I said, I do want to encourage you to go read that if you do have time. But moving back to AMN, I have here Al-Qaeda Sharia judge shot to pieces by multiple assassins in Idlib. I have here another key leadership figure of the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham jihadist organization has been assassinated in Syria's Idlib province. Today, Saraha al-Maki, a highly placed Sharia judge of HTS, was killed by an unidentified gunman after being ambushed outside a mosque in Idlib city. According to sources, the judge was assassinated by 3 assailants who opened fire on him simultaneously as he was leaving the mosque. Despite his position as a key leader with the Syrian-based Al-Qaeda franchise, Saraha al-Maki was a Saudi national. Also from AMN, I have here, speaking of Saudi Arabia, I have here, with nothing better to do, Saudi regime arrests dancing teenager. Yes, the Saudi regime has once again demonstrated itself to be a threat to world freedom and peace as a government which enforces within its own lands and internationally promotes through various lobbies and paramilitary proxies an ideology that criminalizes children who dance in public. Yesterday, this is a little bit older news story here, so it wasn't yesterday, actually. It wasn't September 14th. Saudi regime police arrested a teenager in the city of Jeddah for performing the Macarena, a Spanish dance that became very popular in the West during the 1990s, in front of stationary cars at a pedestrian stop. The event had occurred 1 year ago, almost to the day. The teenager, now in police custody, is being charged. So a year later, being charged. This is the story, that being charged now with violating public morals and disrupting traffic, not catching the would-be moral violating teenager on the day, August 20th, 2016, of when the event actually happened. Saudi police nonetheless expended resources into conducting a methodical investigation beginning about 1 week ago to locate and detain him. As of the present time, the teenager has been directed towards civil prosecution authorities and awaits sentencing. Continuing on with Saudi Arabia, I have here from Breitbart, Saudi Arabia 5th grade school book. The hour will come after Muslims kill the Jews. It says here, Saudi Arabia has come under fire for using school books for children that disparage Christians as unbelievers, quote unquote, and promise that the day of resurrection will not come until Muslims have fought and killed the Jews. An official textbook for 5th graders published by the Saudi Ministry of Education states that the approach of the day of resurrection will be recognizable by a series of signs. It says here, quote, the hour will not come until Muslims will fight the Jews and Muslims will kill the Jews, it declares. According to Human Rights Watch, a U.S.-based advocacy group, Saudi Arabia's religious studies curriculum, quote, contains hateful and incendiary language towards religions and Islamic traditions that do not adhere to its interpretation of Sunni Islam, including the labeling of Jews and Christians as unbelievers with whom Muslims should not associate, quote unquote. Human Rights Watch undertook a comprehensive review of school religion books published by the Saudi Education Ministry for the 2016-2017 school year. The curriculum, titled Al-Tawhid, or Monotheism, comprises 45 textbooks and student workbooks for the primary, middle, and secondary education levels. Now, this just goes to show that this California, I think Davis, California imam, who we talked about here on Islam in the News about a month ago, all of a sudden winds up in the news, in the local news, amazingly, because he quoted hadith. He quoted this exact type of stuff, and after people made a big deal out of it, then all of a sudden, CARE steps in and says, okay, yeah, it was hateful. However people interpret it, it was hateful. So it's like, we see these traditional teachings being taught, and only when people are called out about it is there any problem with it whatsoever. And people need to understand that your Muslim neighbor, your Muslim coworker, your friend, who loves America, loves American freedom, loves the Bill of Rights, loves the Constitution, etc., does not define Islam. Muhammad defined Islam 1,400 years ago. And these teachings we find in these primary sources. And that's why people need to know about them and stop sugarcoating them and watering them down like as if they don't even exist. We need to just point to them and say, hey, if you have a problem with this, well, then that just goes to show one more problem with the religion of Islam. And there's many Muslims out there who are leaving Islam, but that doesn't do anything for them eternally if they die as an atheist, or if they die because as a Hindu or any other man-made religion that they go to. They need to repent and put their trust in the Lord Jesus Christ. That is what needs to happen for every single person throughout the world. And the message of Jesus that we find in the New Testament is a complete opposite of the teachings that we see of Muhammad. If you look at the life of Muhammad, the life of Jesus, very different. Okay, so check out both books if you haven't. Saudi Arabia detains perceived critics of Crown Prince. This is what I have from the Times of India. It says here, Saudi Arabia has begun a wide-ranging crackdown against perceived opponents of the kingdom's new crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. Over the last week, 16 people were held, their friends, relatives, and associates said in interviews. They include prominent Islamic clerics, academics, a poet, and an economist, the head of a youth organization, at least 2 women, and 1 prince, a son of a former king. Some of them were taken from their homes in unannounced raids by security forces, and their computers, cell phones, and personal papers were seized, the friends and relatives said. Those arrested have been held incommunicado, and it is not clear if they have been formally charged with crimes. I think I pronounced that word right. If not, that's the word. Saudi activists have circulated lists of 30 or more people that have been detained, but the scale and goals of the crackdown remain unclear, even to those who fear they could be targeted. Next, I have here from the Catholic leader, Baghdad-born priest kidnapped and tortured by Islamic extremists says Australia is, quote, the promised land for Iraqi Christian refugees. It says here, an Iraqi-born priest who was kidnapped and tortured by Islamic extremists for 9 days says Australia is seen as, quote, the promised land, unquote, for thousands of Christians still suffering from genocide in the Middle East. Baghdad-born Douglas Bazzi of the Chaldean Catholic Church told the Catholic leader that Australia was leading the way in welcoming thousands of Christians forced to exile their homes because of the Islamic State. It says here, quote, I appreciate people from Australia, for one, their prayers, 2, opening their hearts before their arms, and 3, opening the gates to our people who have suffered from this violence, Bazzi said. It also says, my people look to Australia as the promised land. Then it says, the message from Bazzi, who will visit Brisbane next month to speak about his kidnapping in 2006, comes more than a year after he pleaded with the Australian Catholic bishops to prioritize taking in Middle Eastern Christian refugees. Now, it's interesting how he says here that Australia is the promised land. I am not sure if he is aware of all that we've talked about here on Islam in the News, as well as a lot of news I haven't even covered either, but just this slow Islamization of Australia that we have been seeing over just the last year or two. It's really been in the news, of course, but of course been happening for quite some time. We've done shows before in our marathons on the Islamization of the UK. We did a show on the Islamization of Canada with Sandra Solomon on an episode of Colliding Worldviews. And again, here in Islam in the News, we're giving you the news headlines that are happening throughout the world. And that's just one more reason why you want to let your friends, neighbors, family members, everybody know about Islam in the News and how many people are loving this new news source. My next news headline that I have here for me from Boss News, Iran threatens to expel Christian children from schools. This is out of Tehran. It says Iran's government has ordered children belonging to families of one of the country's largest house church movements to study the Quran and Shia Islam teachings or face expulsion from school. A church official confirmed to Boss News Life. The Church of Iran movement is also concerned about 4 jailed members, saying one of them, quote, was deported to a feared secret police facility, unquote, in the southern city of Shiraz. These latest education measures and pressure on Christian prisoners are part of a government campaign against Bible-believing Christians in the Islamic nation, according to Christians familiar with the situation. It says here, quote, right now, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani wants to prove that he is a good Muslim by persecuting Christians, said Farouz Handjani, a Church of Iran council member. Most of the new Christians are former Muslims. The government-backed policy adopted by school authorities in Shiraz and the coastal city of Rasht deprives Christian children of primary and secondary education unless they agree to religious education and instruction that does not conform to their faith, he confirmed. unless they agree to religious instruction that does not conform to their faith, he confirms. So obviously he's saying here that if they are Christians, well, that's not really fine, but if you're going to be a Christian, well, you still need to get this religious instruction, and this religion that they're referring to, of course, is Islam, Shia Islam to be exact. Now, here from World Watch Monitor, I have Afghanistan. Kidnapped Finnish woman freed after 4 months. It says a Finnish aid worker was held hostage for nearly 4 months in Afghanistan, has been freed today, and she had been kidnapped from an international guest house in Kabul, run by her employer, Operation Mercy. So be aware of that employer. When it was attacked in May, her German female colleague and Afghan guard were killed. The unnamed woman was studying Dari, preparing for her first assignment. The Swedish-based aid organization said, "It is with great joy that we confirm the release of our Finnish colleague." She was abducted on the 20th of May. "The well-being of our colleague is being assessed at this time. We request privacy for our colleague and our colleague's family." Also from World Watch Monitor, I have Egypt. Coptic churches closed for security reopen. It says Copts in the village of Esbat al-Forn in the Minya governorate have their church back after it was forced to close for security reasons, quote unquote, last month, and celebrated this with a mass on Sunday morning, the same day that another village church reopened elsewhere in Minya. The first mass at the reopened St. Mary and St. Michael Coptic Orthodox Church, which meets in a private home owned by the diocese, was led by Daniel Babawi, with Minya police forces present to provide security for fear of reprisals from the Muslim community, as reported by Coptic news site Watani. In fact, some Muslims visited the Copts to congratulate them at the reopening of their church. So let's go ahead and check out the video. Also out of Egypt, I have here ex-kidnapper admits they get paid for every Coptic Christian girl they bring in. It says here, "I remember a Coptic Christian girl from a rich, well-known family in Minya. She was kidnapped by 5 Muslim men. They held her in a house, stripped her, and filmed her naked. In the video, one of them also undressed. They threatened to make the video public if the girl wouldn't marry him." G, an Egyptian, admits that he was in a network actively targeting Coptic girls for years before he left Islam. He says that the kidnapping of such girls is now at an all-time high. It says here, quote, "Salafist networks began in the 70s, and it's reached its highest levels now in the era of President Sisi. A group of kidnappers meets in a mosque to discuss potential victims. They keep a close eye on Christians' houses and monitor everything that's going on. On that basis, they weave a spider's web around the girls," he says. "Strategies can be subtle. A Muslim boy tells a Christian girl he loves her and wants to convert to Christianity for her," G explains. "They start a romantic relationship until one day they decide to escape together. What the girls don't know is that they are actually being kidnapped, and most of the time they will not marry their kidnapper, but someone else." Also from World Watch Monitor, historic Armenian cathedral desecrated in southeast Turkey. 18 months after the Turkish government seized control of the largest Armenian cathedral in the Middle East, secretly taken photographs inside Diyarbakir's Serp Girados Armenian Apostolic Church reveal considerable damage to the sanctuary and walls of the now desecrated church in southeast Turkey. Published by the Armenian Weekly, the exclusive photographs taken this past July expose broken and sandbagged windows, one defaced crucifix, a massive hole poking through one outer wall, the removal of pews and worship utensils, empty altars, and some chipped columns. Only a few upended wooden pews can be seen, and with no worship utensils or sacramental hangings in sight. It says here, so the church is really naked, quote unquote, a source in Diyarbakir told World Watch Monitor. From Al Monitor, Hamas finds itself at Egypt's mercy. The leaders of Hamas gathered in Cairo on September 9th for a high-level meeting. It was their face-to-face encounter since Ismail Haniyeh's election to head the group's political bureau and the selection of Yahya Sinwar to lead the movement in Gaza. The two men were joined by Saleh al-Rouri, expelled from both Turkey and Qatar, and now based in Lebanon. Sinwar's deputy Halil al-Hayya and Musa Abu Marzouk considered the Hamas leader closest to the Egyptian regime. The one person who did not receive permission from Egypt to pass through the Rafah border crossing to participate in the meeting was Fatih Hamad, former interior minister in the Hamas government. A security source in the Palestinian Authority told Al Monitor that the Egyptians suspect Hamad of having cooperated with jihadist forces in the Sinai, making him persona non grata in Cairo. Also from World Watch Monitor, Fulani's family had him jailed on false charges because he is a Christian. It says here, belonging to the ethnic Fulani tribe means you're almost certainly Muslim. When Bulus, a Nigerian living in northern Bachi state, decided he wanted to become a Christian, he was not only ostracized by his family, they also made sure he ended up in prison on false charges. Balus' days now seem endless. He shares his home, a cell, in a prison in Bachi with more people than is healthy. At night, it's a struggle to find enough room to lie down comfortably on the cold and dirty floor among the other bodies. Emaciated from insufficient nutrition and regular bouts of diarrhea, he doesn't know when this ordeal will end and dares not fuel any expectations of a speedy release. It says here, Bulus, 32, has committed no crime other than being a Fulani who decided to leave Islam. Now, the next story I have here lines right up with this one. So it says, there will never be peace for Nigeria's middle belt unless there's equality and justice. Obscured by Boko Haram's headlines, violence has also raged further south in Nigeria's middle belt, a less reported years-long campaign which experts now believe has been responsible for more deaths than Boko Haram. Militants among the ethnic Fulani, a predominantly Muslim and nomadic population of cattle herders, are suspected of targeting the indigenous, mainly Christian population, mostly farmers. World Watch Monitor spoke to Professor Yusufi Turaki, director of the Center for the Study of Religion, Church and Society at Jos ECWA Theological Seminary in Nigeria, about this underreported conflict and revivalist Islamism. We are going to move on to Breitbart. I have Pakistani Christian beaten to death by Muslim classmates whilst teacher read newspaper. Believe it or not, it says here, a teenager from a Christian family has been beaten to death by Muslim classmates at the MC Model Boys Government High School in Pakistan, allegedly for drinking from the same water cooler as them. Sharoon Masih, described as, quote, an incredibly bright student from an impoverished Christian family by the British Pakistani Christian Association, was targeted from his first day at the school, where he was the only Christian in his year. Classmates isolated Sharoon, telling him, quote, you're a Christian, don't dare sit with us if you want to live, according to Christian Today. They also attempted to convert him, slapped him, and verbally abused him as a shura, a pejorative term for a Christian, and refused to let him use a common drinking water cooler. Muslims are discouraged from drinking from the same vessels as non-Muslims in Islam. And another Pakistani Christian, Aisha Bibi, ended up languishing on death row for years following a dispute over her fitness to carry a water bowl. From Christians in Pakistan, forced conversions of Christian girls in Pakistan make a mockery of its constitution. In a famous speech on August 11th, 1947, Pakistan's founding father and first governor, General Muhammad Ali Jinnah, addressed that the new country was being built on the idea of religious tolerance. But 70 years later, a trend of forced conversions in the country is making a mockery of the Constitution of Pakistan, which offers equal rights to all religious minorities. Last seen a video on Facebook in which a young boy and girl were leaving the court premises. The girl's family was endeavoring to quit dragging her, yet the girl was going ahead with sharp strides. The court enabled her to remain with her with her husband. The family demanded that the girl's age was only 14 years and she was not in the period of marriage at the moment under Pakistan laws. Be that as it may, the judge enables them to wed. Unfortunately, the girl belongs to a Christian family of Lahore, and her family is much known in the area and active in church activities. Research uncovered that this incident was displayed a year ago. And as per the Marriage Act 1929 of Pakistan, no boy or girl could marry at 18 years old without parents' consent, while guardians concurred on the off chance that this age must be no less than 16 years of age. As indicated by reports from the Women's Foundation printed in 2015, just about 1,000 girls are admitted to Islam consistently in Pakistan. As per the National Commission claims, 700 of them are Christians, while whatever remains of them have a place with Hindu religion. Have here from Al Monitor, Erdogan trouble continues with U.S. indictment. And we have here Turkey's caliph. He has headaches with the United States because of they're growing rather than decreasing under President Donald Trump's administration, with serious implication for Ankara's already tense ties with Washington. The cause of his latest annoyance, however, has nothing to do with Syria or Iraq, where Ankara and Washington remain at loggerheads over key issues. Erdogan, who is accused of stifling the independence of the judiciary at home in order to consolidate his power, is increasingly up against the independent U.S. judiciary, which last week indicted a minister of his for taking millions of dollars in bribes in order to help Iran circumvent U.S. sanctions. The case is also expected to cause political complications for Erdogan at home if he can't find a way to contain developments in the United States that are beyond his control. Here from the Gospel Herald, I have Christian man sentenced to death in Pakistan after sending Muslim friend blasphemous, quote-unquote, poem. It says a Pakistani Christian man accused of insulting Islam, quote-unquote, after sending a Muslim friend a poem on WhatsApp has been sentenced to death, a high court ruled on Thursday. According to the AFP, Nadeem James was handed a death sentence by a Pakistani court after being charged with blasphemy last July. At the time, his Muslim friend Yasser Bashir complained to police that James sent him a poem on the messaging app that was, quote, derogatory towards the Prophet Muhammad and other holy figures. Defense lawyer Anjum Wakil told AFP that he will appeal the sentence, claiming his client was, quote, framed by Bashir, who was angered by James's relationship with a Muslim girl. He told reporters that the trial was held inside a prison due to security reasons after local Muslim clerics had threatened James and his family. Last year, a police official told reporters that James' relatives had been taken into protective custody while security had been increased in Christian neighborhoods in the town of Sara-e-Alamgir in Punjab province due to, quote, local tension concerning the complaint. This is out of Reuters. Hatf Saful Rasul was 11 years old when he told his father, a convicted Islamic militant, that he wanted to leave school and go to Syria to fight for the Islamic State. The boy was visiting his father in a maximum security prison during a break from Ibn Masud, his Islamic boarding school. Saiful Anam said in a 12,000-word essay on his son and religion that was published online. It says here, quote, "At first I did not respond and considered it just a child's joke," he wrote. But it became different when Hatf stated his willingness over and over. Hatf told his father some of his friends and teachers from the Ibn Masud had gone to fight for Islamic State and become martyrs there, Anam wrote. Anam agreed to let him go, noting in his essay that the school was managed by comrades who share our ideology, quote unquote. Hatf traveled to Syria with a group of relatives in 2015, joining a group of French fighters. Reuters spoke to 3 Indonesian counterterrorism officials who confirmed the boy went to Syria. Have here from WND reports China banning children from church. It says it has banned churches unless they are affiliated with the government, imprisoned pastors and lay leaders, and discriminated against churchgoers. Lately, government officials have removed crosses from church buildings. Now, according to the UCA News, at least 4 regional governments in China are banning children from church. The governments have issued notices that, quote, restrict children from joining Christian groups and attending religious activities. The report said children are being turned away from the church even if they show up with parents. Then out of Singapore, this is from the Christian Times, Singapore bans 2 foreign Christian preachers over Islamophobic remarks. Singapore has banned 2 foreign Christian preachers from speaking in the country on Friday due to their denigrating and inflammatory, quote unquote, towards Islam and other religions. According to the report from Straits Times, Singapore's Manpower Ministry, in consultation with the Ministry of Home Affairs, rejected the application of the 2 preachers for short-term work passes that required them to preach in the country. So friends, as you can hear, as through many news stories on this show, this is a continuing trend throughout the world. We see it in countries that are under Sharia to a smaller degree, or that are under full Sharia, of course, when we look to Iran, we look to Saudi Arabia. And these are just more examples of what life is like when you leave much of the West and go to countries that are under Sharia. And what is the worldview of Islam? What does that entail? It entails the whole world being under Sharia. So every single week, these news stories should be a warning to you of the potential that every single country throughout the world actually has, based on the end goal of the Islamic religion. So we want to make a distinction between the religion of Islam, the political system of Islam, and just call it a religio-political system of Islam to sum it all up, versus Muslims, who are people made in the image of God, who need a savior. And that's why it's so important that we continue to share the gospel with Muslims around us, and at the same time, critique Islam, and be sure that everyone throughout the world is free to do the same, because believe me, if you haven't watched many shows, it is not the same when you look at the other side. And that's why it's so important for you to come back here every single Friday for Islam and the News. We thank God for you. Please pray for us. Please support ABN and the Trinity channel. And we will see you next time for another episode of Islam and the News.